point, I might as well be who I am.
Oh,
Like there's
well,
no hiding anymore, I guess.
Well, you're doing Moms for Liberty, right?
Oh, that's a whole nother, yeah, no,
Okay. Oh,
because
oh,
a
they,
whole nother.
okay.
yeah.
Uh,
I'm I'm
Yeah.
I'm Moms for America. I was going to be Moms
oh,
for Liberty, but that was because, you know, infighting, which is probably a great uh
oh,
conversation.
how groups
Yeah.
groups tend to splinter like that.
It's
Yep.
crazy. Yeah.
Yeah. Are you
So,
seeing it there in those groups?
yeah, so it was just a I want to be as diplomatic as possible, but I'm seeing so much infighting with people who should be on the same side. I was actually called a communist this week.
Oh,
Oh my gosh, really?
I'm shocked. I'm beside myself, to be honest with you.
Yeah, yeah. It was dropping. I was just like, okay, just like the R word, right? If everything is something, then nothing is something. And
Mm,
we have real issues with real Marxism. So don't say because I don't agree with you on one position
mhm,
that
Right.
makes me, I'm one of the strongest fighters against this nonsense. So
mhm,
Yes, you are.
yeah.
mhm, mhm. Wow. Yeah, infighting in groups, that's really interesting. I think that there's a lot that we can talk about with regard to that. There's so
Hmm.
much of that happening. And I think we're just in there's such a feisty spirit right now. It's not reasonable that it would remain just directed at certain particular enemies because it's almost a process that we've all adopted, this
Yeah.
polarizing process. So of course it's going to happen more and more within groups as well.
Yeah. And the thing is that that's the other side, which I know we hate to have that conversation, but I think at this point it's really kind of a battle between, for lack of better, good and evil. And
Mm,
so, or freedom and tyranny is another way. I'm actually
mm.
wearing a shirt tomorrow to school that tomorrow's my first day of school, and I'm wearing a shirt that talks about how democracy essentially always leads to tyranny.
Mhm.
Hmm.
So I think,
Interesting.
yeah. But no matter how we dismantle, it's it's always the action that they want, right?
Mm.
So whether it's fighting them and being considered, hateful or whatever else, but I think it's more entertaining for them when we fight each other.
Interesting.
Well, we're
Well,
not technically a democracy anyway. We're a
No,
republic, and that's
right.
for a reason. And I think a lot of people have forgotten that somewhere along the way. They used to teach that in civics class as to
Yes,
why we're a republic, right? So that
exactly.
voices all, you don't have the mob mentality that's taking over, and you got the little guy or the minority voice that still gets just as much of a chance to speak up as
Right.
the overarching, kind of mob group
And no
that
one seems to understand that they are carving a democracy. They are
yes.
carving a democracy with their kids where they don't have another point of view.
mhm.
Yes.
So I'll tell you one little story that happened this last week. My son, textbook, he's in his history class, and textbook, his teacher says, well, we're not going to spend a lot of time on the Constitution because that's just written by stodgy old white men.
Oh God.
And 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 he sends me the comment, and I look it up, and I'm like, what were the ages of the people who signed the Constitution? Like
They
Hmm.
were in their 20s
some of,
or
yeah.
teens.
So
They,
the oldest was in his 40s. So
yeah,
yeah,
most of them were very young. They
yes.
were they were soldiers, they battled, etc.
Which to
Hmm.
a bunch of high school kids would be an interesting story,
Hmm.
wouldn't it?
Hmm.
That is their
Absolutely.
age.
Yes.
So intentionally turning them into people who believe what I call the bumper stickers of history, so because then they are told, it is your civic duty to be active, to get out and to do, but you're only supposed to do what we tell you to do.
Yes.
I just find that very interesting for kids. So
It is
yeah.
interesting. Yeah, hello everybody who's joining us. Clem62, Build Baby Build with Ty King. Hi Ninja Kitty. It's good to see you guys in the chat and thanks for joining us. I'm Leslie Elliott Boyce, and I'm here with Christine Sefein Wolk and Cari Bartholomew. We've done these for like a year and a half, and there's a bunch of them. So check out previous conversations if you're interested. This series doesn't really have a title. It's just we try to check in with each other every once or twice a month, and usually on Wednesdays about this time. So you're right, Ninja Kitty, it is a sneaky stream. But this is about our time slot that we've been aiming for, usually every other week. So yeah, it's
Yeah.
something you said, Cari, about it's a battle between good and evil. And that's something that's a very, very interesting. But I tend to think that what we're dealing with is more on the level of contagious thought patterns rather than evil people. Like the
Yeah,
thought patterns themselves are evil, if you will.
right.
Like these ways of separating people, dividing people,
Yes.
engendering hatred, and creating resentment. These are the evil things, if you will. It's not people, it's
No.
the way that people adopt thought patterns.
And I think last time we spoke, I said that I'm trying to look at the woke as being broken.
Mm,
Because if we can look at it that way, then we can see that people, um, there's a redemption arc there.
mhm.
And so if we can see it that way, then we can not hate. I had a family member the other day post publicly that they're low key ashamed to call me family because I'm so full of hatred.
Wow.
And I'm just like, it's really hard when you stand up for truth, even when it's painful. And you expect other people to hate you, but when it's family, even if it's distant family, which it was, it still is like, where in the world is our refuge in the middle of this thing?
Mhm.
It's a big reason why I don't use social media because, to be quite frank, I do not want those kinds of comments. Although I should be able to handle it in, with grace and poise, I know it's going to upset me and it's going to
Mhm.
set me off. So, to protect myself from having to go through that whole process, I actually just cut it out. And I cut it out a long time ago. It was before actually all of this became at the forefront. It was back in the day when people were posting their stories and their photos, making it look like their lives were perfect. And I knew these people's lives on the back end, and that was not the case. So it didn't feel real or something that that was authentic in any way.
Mhm.
So I try to just keep that in mind. Don't give it so much power or so much influence, because it really, would they say that to your face? That's the question. Or are you going to hide behind a screen? That also I don't care for too much.
And that'll be interesting because their family reunions in 2 weeks.
Uh-oh.
Yeah.
So we'll see.
Okay. So you'll see. Yeah, you'll see.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah, I agree. That's one of the reasons of many that I stopped using Facebook in particular is that you end up in these stupid fights with family members and friends,
Yeah.
people that you care about. First of all, you know too much. You know somebody you went to high school with that you haven't seen in 20 years, you know what they had for breakfast, which
Yes.
Yeah.
why. But also you're having an argument over some dumb political thing with your cousin, and why, what's
Right.
you why don't you talk about things that are actually important to your relationship? We get into these weird corners on social media that we wouldn't
Yeah.
enter into naturally.
I think that the reason that I stay on is because I find so many people who do wake up. They have their
Hmm.
moment. And when they have their moment, I feel like you have to be there for them.
Mhm.
But it is hard because I find myself just walking away, not saying everything that I think. And I try to be an authentic and genuine person. But I also understand that you can never take back what you say. So you just have to go, is this worth saying? And for me,
Right.
my line is truth. My line is, this is truth. This is factual. Don't tell me about this if you're not going to look at the WPATH files. Right.
Hmm.
So I want to have those conversations, but I will not get into you're a stupid, ignorant, blah, blah, blah type of person, because you can't ever take that back.
Mhm. Yeah, one of so two of my really good friends are still on. We've had conversations about how they're still on social media. They still use Facebook, and so I have a couple of thoughts about that. One of them says something kind of similar to what you said, Cari. Um, she's on there and she feels like it does some good to have dialogue about things where people are really closed and stuck. And if you can enter into it diplomatically, you can open up people's eyes to certain things that challenge mainstream narratives, if you will, just to use a cliche. And she feels like it's doing some good to still be engaged in that form of dialogue. And then another one of them is on some kind of local moms group because she's a local mom. And she, the group is so woke, but she feels like it does some good for her to keep an eye on what's happening around her.
Sure.
And so being aware of that. And I wonder this, so my counterpoints to that, and I really respect your position. I respect both of my friends' positions as well. I don't think that they're wrong, but I have a different position on it. And my position is that I think that one of the viral patterns that we've been engaging in is this pattern of thinking we know better than someone else about something. And so I want to drop out of that altogether. I'm not trying to challenge people directly. I'll engage with the people that want to engage with me, and I'll have really great conversations with those people, but I'm not going around dropping little truth nuggets or, whatever it is that other people are doing, because I'm kind of tired of the arrogance of people thinking that they know better than each other. The whole activist mindset is one of you don't know, and it's my job to teach you. And so I
Yeah.
respect the individual sovereignty and autonomy of each person to connect to the truth, because I do feel like there's an objective truth, but that it's found through the individual searching. And then the other thing is that the moms group, by being one more lurker in the group, don't you sort of increase this perception of consensus for other people who don't know that you're actually disagreeing with what's going on in this group? Like, what does this group say? It's got 300 people. What percentage of them are just watching and just kind of like eating their popcorn and being like, what is going on with these crazy people? Is it 30%? Is it 50%? Is it 10%? We don't know, but by being another person in that group, you are tacitly agreeing in a way to what's going on in that group. So you might actually be adding to a social contagion by appearing to be in false consensus.
I think it's like rules for radicals. I
Mm,
think we're at a place where it really is war. And I actually can't spend time in those groups because I often become the subject of them.
mm,
And it's really draining to see that that many people hate you without knowing who you are. But um I send other people over, and it helps to know. It helps to know. Like sometimes they'll say, "You've got to see this," and I'll say, "I don't need to see this. I need your breakdown of what's happening here."
mhm,
Only like when I was running, right? When I was running for an election, when I was campaigning, I needed to know what was being said about me so that I could, if it was important, put it out there that this isn't true, right? And then some things you just skipped over. But I do think that we have to know what's coming, because it really is a war. And it's not, again, it's not a war where people are intentionally evil. I think there are some who are. Um, a lot of people, I don't know, I don't a lot of people like to claim that Satan himself, that there's a ton of people who are religious that are Satanists in Utah.
mm,
I don't have any proof on that, so I don't have that conversation with people. I just go,
mhm,
okay, the people will say, "Oh, this person wears red shoes. Do you know what that means?"
mhm.
They like red. I'm like, I
I
don't
have
know.
some red shoes.
Right.
I
And
like
I have
red.
some rainbow shoes. I have some,
Yeah.
and it
Which
doesn't.
are probably so cute. Yeah. That I don't like that the rainbow symbol though for me, and I love rainbow colors and whatever, but it's actually been so affiliated now with LGBTQ plus, et cetera, with the gender the transgender movement, that it's kind of ruined my like for rainbow. It's every time I see it, and
Mm,
I think this is the problem, right? Every time I see a rainbow, that is what I think of immediately now, and it makes me upset. And I get upset because, number one, on what planet do the Dodgers, I was just at a game yesterday, care about supporting any kind of activist group? They're there because they're entertaining, and they're supposed to entertain you and play a game. And on the field, everybody is just as good as their talent, not more, not less, not skin color, not well, they're all male, but not skin color, not where you come from, not even whether you speak English. For God's sakes, there's so many people on there that are playing professional sports that don't speak English, that have interpreters that travel around with them. So this has become much bigger than, just the classic white person sport. It's not anymore. So why they're promoting kind of this whole rainbow situation, it bothered me. It bothered me a great deal, because I don't want to affiliate something that I like and that I care about to be kind of intertwined with a movement that I don't believe in, that I
mhm,
think is just full of holes and is just padding for some other kind of agenda. So I think that's something that I know we weren't talking about this, but when you mentioned having red shoes and you mentioned having rainbow, that's like, for me, does wearing red mean I'm a Republican now? Like, I have this kind of hang up a little bit,
mhm,
that like all of these things mean something that they really don't. It doesn't mean
mhm,
anything if I'm wearing a red shirt. I love red on red shirts and red shoes, and I have a lot of red actually in my wardrobe.
mhm.
I don't have a lot of rainbow, but when I see it, it makes me automatically associate it with this particular group. I feel like it's been hijacked, that
Yeah.
I can't just have a rainbow anymore without it meaning something different.
Clem62 says, I'm gay and I can't stand it. And Do Re Mia Culpa says, I feel the same way now about being repulsed by the rainbow symbol. One thing, and I agree. And I remember when I was a kid, rainbows were on everything. And it
Yeah.
was cute. It was like a symbol of, well,
Lisa Frank.
yeah, yeah, exactly. Yep. And the bright colors of the 1980s, the crazy
Oh
gaudy
yeah.
colors that we had back, the hypercolor shirts and rainbows on everything. And it was just a symbol of fun and innocence. And um, I will say, by doing this Pride Progress flag with the really jarring, clashing colors and using that, they've kind of left us the rainbow again. I think everybody can just take that rainbow back, because
Hmm.
they've kind of ruined it with their terrible color schemes.
I think the emphasis needs to be on, we can just take it back. We can
Yeah,
take back
Yes.
anything.
yeah,
So, like when I teach a Sunday school class, I tell the kids, every time you see a rainbow, think of this. So
yeah.
I'm like, every time you drive by and you see one. But also, I know somebody who just, they're going to have a baby after they lost a baby, right? And so their whole theme is rainbow because, one, it's very readily available, but also because they've lost a child. But we cede our own power when we say,
Mhm.
okay, what you want is what we're going to do. So I think it's okay. And
Yes.
it's hard for me because I don't hide. I'm a person of faith. I'm a Christian, but
Mhm.
I think it's okay sometimes to be the bitch.
Yeah.
You
So
know what? Carrie, I want to say that weaves back in. I just want to make one more plug for my position on leaving those terrible groups. The groups that are they're mired in their little
yeah,
hive of activist jargon and spewing gossipy hatred about other people. I want to plug leaving them again, because if everybody who really finds that repulsive just exits,
yeah,
they will expire. Those groups will die. They will blow up and dry away, because there's only so much of that can go around. I think it thrives on the shock value and the watchers.
yeah,
If we just take our attention and put it where it's positive, where it's doing something positive for our lives, we'll benefit ourselves, and we'll help to extinguish some of that behavior. It's just like when you're raising a child, when you're teaching a toddler, you extinguish behaviors by not giving them any attention.
right,
Hmm.
yeah, true.
Do you think we're turning a corner? Somebody the other day said to me they felt a real corner, that we're sharply turning. from insanity back to sanity. And I wanted to know your thoughts on it, the both of you, if you really think we're turning a corner, or is it sort of a false facade? I don't know, if you will. Cari, you look like you have some thoughts.
Yeah, Cari. Cari looks like she's gonna say something.
So I think that we're turning a corner intellectually, and I think that we're maybe turning a corner morally. But I also think that things are in place that it doesn't matter if we turn a corner. Um,
Mm,
I honestly think that we're being groomed to be slaves.
Mm.
So, but I also believe, and I believe that as long as we have hope, which is why I really believe in this idea that we don't fight against something, we fight for something.
hmm
Because as long as we know what we're fighting for, we can keep going. But I mean, when we watch what, jumping into politics, but when we watch some of the things that they're saying, like if she wins, they'll get rid of the filibuster and they're just going to
hmm
push everything through and
hmm
that's it.
hmm
You know,
Mm.
when we know that we have people in the conservative party that are not conservatives and that they're there specifically to fundamentally change and to infiltrate, then what do we do? Because it doesn't matter if it doesn't matter, like if Utah thinks that it's going to stand on sovereign rights, if we have a governor who isn't going to stand on sovereign rights and he's going to be supported by people who have pretended to get where they are. But I do think that on a moral level, I think people are starting to wake up. I'm seeing a ton of people recognize that SEL is bad. SEL companies themselves are changing the name of what they're doing. So they're not saying SEL anymore. They're saying mindfulness. We hear a
Mm,
lot of that right now, right?
Mm.
So they're taking away those words and those terms because they recognize that a lot of people know what's going on. Um, but we need a miracle. That's that's it. We need a miracle, or and another.
because I think the evil that you're talking about, or that you were talking about, I don't look at the evil as being your everyday extreme radical leftist. It's the elitist group that has created the ideology or has pushed the ideology through because there's an agenda. That to me is where the evil lies. It lies in our government.
We
Yeah,
have to
because
be. Go
go
ahead.
ahead.
Well,
No, no, go ahead.
I think we have to be careful in that we can be foolish enough to give people the benefit of the doubt who don't deserve it, but we also can be too guarded and
Mm-hmm.
accuse people of being something that they are not. So when we go down at the level, is it possible that there are just regular, college kids who have gotten caught up and are now part of the evil? Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
But it's also probable that many of them are just regurgitating what they've been taught.
Mm-hmm.
Is it possible that there are some elites who don't even know? I believe that's the case. I've seen, because of what I do, I've seen some senators and other people who were like, wait a second, what? I did what?
Mm-hmm.
Remember when we talked about the Safe app and how that
Mm-hmm.
goes to the government?
Mm-hmm.
They had no idea when they brought that in. It wasn't
Mm-hmm.
presented to them. It was presented as we've got a lot of kids who are exiting this world. We need to do something to help them.
Mm-hmm.
And so they're not evil, even if they are, the privileged class, so to speak. They're not necessarily evil. It's just like you said when you were talking at the beginning, Leslie, that it's the ideology that
Mm-hmm.
is, in my opinion, utterly evil. But there are people who know what they're doing, and I think on all levels.
I think that I don't know about the turning a corner. I'm not sure about that. Um, but I think that what the evil is, I think the root of evil is the desire to control others.
Mm-hmm.
And so
Yes.
and I do this constantly, I'm doing it too. We say we need to, or we
Mm-hmm.
should. If we don't, what we're doing is we're assuming a position in a collective, but we're assuming a steering position in a collective. We're assuming that we have some ability to tell other people how they ought to act. And the greatest concentration of that is in centralized controlling bureaucracy and these the powers that be that want to direct people's minds and perspectives and beliefs so that they will act in a certain way so that they're easier to manage. And yet, I think this shows up in a lot of places. I don't think it's I don't see social justice ideology as the evil that needs to be controlled. If that's put into perspective and it's one person's belief system and they want to act out that belief system in their own life, then that's just totally fine. They can go ahead and do that. There's room for us to all have a lot of quirky different perspectives and views on things, as long as we ultimately take full personal responsibility and stop trying to take so much responsibility for other people. Like I just saw this thing. I try not to watch we talked about this a couple weeks ago with the rage bait on Twitter and the rage bait online, all these videos that are designed to make you feel a certain way. But I did watch this part, just like a snippet of this one, and I turned it right off as soon as I saw what it was. But it was a lady who was ranting about how nobody cares about anybody else because 99% of you aren't even wearing your masks. And, it's like this, you don't care about other people. And that feeling, that's the good versus evil. She's charged up with that same thought about good versus evil. She is representing good, and you people who don't care are representing evil. And I think it's really easy to plug ourselves into that. We can
Do
see
you
that
think,
that formula. We can plug in our own
yeah,
ideology.
would you give somebody like that the benefit of the doubt, though? That's my question. Where this person might actually believe this because this person doesn't have the knowledge, the awareness, isn't educated enough to understand, about math and how they failed and that they never really worked to begin with, all of this kind of stuff. Would you give somebody like that the benefit of the doubt that she's just not educated about it? Or would
Absolutely.
you would?
Yeah,
Yes,
absolutely. Yeah.
unless they came and, even if it's just a stare at you, even if it's just a glare, or
Mhm.
but especially if they say something, like if they point out and get into your business, that I feel like is the point where I'm done.
I
So
guess I just think of it as the same thing with attention. It's like, sure, you are somebody you are gripped by something that
yeah.
is causing you a lot of distress, and you want to make it my problem.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not going to let you make it my problem. So I wish you a good day and I stop paying attention to you. I'm
Mm-hmm.
just going to click, nope, I'm not watching that. I'm not going to let that get me upset. When it starts to be like a mandate on the state level, that's where it becomes a problem. And what I do there is the same thing I did when we had mask mandates in Washington. I go about my business and I don't do it. And if that ended up leading me into trouble, which it did a couple of times, but it was more social trouble. I guess I did get ejected from a couple of places where I was not allowed to come in because I didn't have a mask on my
Me
face. So
too.
that happened to me. But more it was social trouble with somebody yelling at me. And I just
Mm-hmm.
conducted myself like normal. I just was still polite, ignore that, and just go about my business. And I'm just working really hard on taking personal responsibility. And if I can model
Well,
that for my kids or somebody else, then that's great.
and this is the thing that I found very interesting, goes back to what you were talking about, Cari, about kind of being a lurker on some of those groups to just see what's really going on. So I have a couple mask stories, but the one that was, I think, the most, it just gave me such an understanding of what's probably happening. So I decided to take my mask off, and I was at the CVS at the pharmacy, and I was in line, and I had some woman come and rant and rave and scream and shout, and they brought out the nurse who does the vaccines, and she started screaming and shouting at me. And then before you know it, I had a whole line of people in front of me and behind me saying, "Leave her alone. If she doesn't
Mm.
want to wear a mask, don't make her." But
Gosh, that's great.
none of them took the mask off.
Mm.
That was so key. They wouldn't do it. They would defend me,
Mm.
but they wouldn't themselves take it off. When I sat there knowing that these people don't want masks on themselves either, probably, at least a
Mhm.
few of them. And that, I think, is where the issue, if we're talking about the evil and whatnot, that's where people are getting turned a little bit. But what I said to the line, take your masks off. They're not going to throw us out of here. I mean, I ended up being like me talking to a big group, which I didn't expect. And somebody, that was at the checkout stand was like, "Oh, I heard about the mask thing back there." I mean, it became a thing. I
Mhm.
did end up putting it back on because I needed my prescription and they were going to throw me out. Honestly, I was going to make them call the police, but I didn't want to take it to that level. But my point is, those people may not think or feel the same way um, as they portray themselves on the outside. But for whatever reason, they
Right.
themselves have their own fears from their peer groups or from just their own idea of what it means to be a good person, that they wouldn't, kind of dissent against the draconian measures or dissent against the forceful mandates. That's where I think we have an issue, because those people are probably in the majority, and the problem is those people are also afraid of quote unquote getting in trouble, or of getting your wrist slapped, or looking like a bad person. And that's what irks me the most, is because I do believe that's the majority. People, I believe, in the majority have more sane approaches than people on the extreme side, one or the other.
So it comes down to cowardice. I was talking
Sure.
with I was in a teacher's retreat this week, and a woman was talking about her situation with masks, and she walked in as a teacher for several years, decades, and she didn't want to wear her mask. She said when she walked into the room, people had them hanging off their ears and under their chins and on their head and, doing this kind of thing. But the school district said, you will wear these.
Mhm.
And when she said, I will not do this. Um, Even the people who had them hanging off their ears and under their chins looked at her like you're an evil person. And
Mm.
she ended up in a situation where they were kind of forced to fire her. They tried to get her to retire early, and she was like, "Nope, you're gonna have to fire me because I've done nothing here." But to watch people who have to know, if you're not wearing, like if you're here and you're, scared and you've got that, I can almost respect that because you really truly believe it. But when you just go with the group because it's the most convenient, or quite frankly, it's your security.
Hmm.
If it's your security, I don't respect it, but I can understand it, you know.
Right.
But when you turn to shaming the one person who has the courage to stand up, that's when I think we're in a place that how do we get out of this? When we're really willing to just criticize, berate, crush another human being because that's what the mob tells us we need to be doing.
Well,
I think that there's sort of a taxonomy of types of people who fall into these situations. Somebody did a really good breakdown. I think James Lindsay did one once that was really cool. And then Bruce Party also wrote an article where he laid out the different types of people in a given movement. They're really interesting. If I can find those, I'll link them in the description if I remember to do that. Um, but there's zealots on either side. I mean, there's a bigger breakdown than this, but there's zealots on either side. Like there's the absolute do or dies on either side. I would put myself on that side of the no, like in terms of the mask issue. And we could probably break this down for all different issues. But I was like a hell no kind of person. There were very few instances where I would be willing to cave or make an exception. But for the most part, social pressure wasn't enough for me to go along with something that I didn't think made any sense. And I felt like I was contributing to something bad if I went
hmm
along with it. I felt like by putting on the mask, I would have represented acquiescence and support of the measures, and I
hmm
couldn't represent that because I felt like they were wrong. And then on the other end, you have the zealots who are the enforcers of the measures, who believe in it really strongly and are quick to jump down your throat, like the people who yelled at you at CVS, Christine.
hmm
And then in the middle, I don't think of it as cowardice. I mean, this is my thought on this, and I'd like to see what you think about this, both of you. But the there's we had this great wave of everybody calling everybody sheep. Remember that? Like
Yes.
that they were just sheep if they were
People.
wearing, yeah, sheeple.
People.
And I thought that's interesting because the Latin root of the word for gregarious and the word gregarious and the word egregious. It's the same
Hmm.
word, the same root. And gregarious is, and it involves the herd. It's about the herd. So gregarious is I'm of the herd. I fit in well. I get along with everybody in the herd. And egregious is I am outside. I'm cast out. I don't belong with the herd. Right. The herd is our natural. It's a natural protective instinct that we have to go along with what other people are doing. And I
Hmm.
actually think that it is a really beautiful part of what it is to be a human being, that we have this subconscious affinity that we do like, we have this mirroring thing that we just like each other on a very subconscious level, and we want to be like each other, and we do what the other people are doing, and that's a good thing for the most part. It's what keeps us cohesive and keeps tribes and structures and cultures together. But there is a way to exploit that. And that's what I think is being done when you use manipulative media,
That's
manipulative government to send
that's
bad
evil.
messages. But to think that there's only a small percentage of that herd that's ever going to have whatever it is. And they tried, part of the messaging around COVID was to try to call those people antisocial and say that there was something wrong with them. There was a
Yeah.
pathologization of that. And I think that some of it is that. I do think that some of the people who are able to go against the herd do have something antisocial in them. But there's also something else, and it's something that we're all talking about. It's that I think for myself, and I have the courage to do that even when it really hurts me socially.
Okay.
So,
Well,
but not everybody has that.
yeah, I think you're right about that. The other point for me is, where did everybody get the idea that masks were going to save lives? The people at the top were the ones who controlled that narrative. People looked to, oh, Fauci saying this, so it must be right, or oh, whomever saying this, so it must be right. Those ideas of wearing masks, or those ideas of what we do to be good people, we are taught that by somebody somewhere, whether you're 2, 3 years old or you're a 90-year-old
Mhm.
adult, you're being taught something. Where you go to get that information, or who you choose to be your teacher via it, mainstream media, that all of the different social media platforms where people are getting censored and all of that stuff. You're also choosing to get the information from those people. Those people, to me, are what represent the evil. That's why I think I'm so stuck on the people that are the Faucis, the Peter Daszaks, the people that were in the middle of this, the fact that it was probably, grown in a lab and released, the fact that it was on purpose, most likely. I believe that. I do believe it was released on purpose. Maybe an accident. I don't know, but I do believe it was man made. That's what I will
Mhm.
say. But that was not allowed to be seen on any social media platform. So people are making their decisions based on what a group of elitists say, who have their own agenda, who they themselves. How much did Big Pharma make off the vaccine? It's absolutely sickening how much they made off of that, and how
Mhm.
many people died from the vaccine that were underreported. What about the overreported, bloated um, statistics on who actually had COVID and who didn't when they were in the hospital? So, again, for me, that's the evil. Yes, it's the ideology, but it's also the people delivering it. And this whole mass of us deciding that they know best and they have our best interests at heart. And some of them didn't know better, but a lot of them did know better and did it anyway. That's the evil to me, right there. And the rest of us, in our need to be accepted and to be part of an in group and to be part of a good, being a good person, have that desire to fit in socially, followed what this group of quote unquote experts were, when there were so many holes in the story. And I think that's where I get stuck, on that particular group being where the evil is generated.
I want to read a comment from the chat because I think it's relevant. So, and I think it's a good question. Do Re Mea Culpa says, at the start of COVID, masking was meant to prevent the spread of what was a very horrible disease, at least in the first wave. I don't understand why people are and were so anti-mask. Is it about fear of being controlled? I wonder. Would you be okay with your dentist or surgeon not wearing a mask? And then goes on to say, I think the viral anti-maskers were probably getting triggered in a "you're not the boss of me" kind of immature way. That's probably not a popular opinion here. I I have some thoughts about that. I will respond to that. I think that's a great question. I think that that is part of the question that a lot of people who were going along with it, who were like, hey, don't beat up on that lady, kick her out for not wearing it. But also, why don't you just wear it? What's the big deal? So there were a lot of people who fell into that. And I think it's worth addressing. Cari, do you want to respond to that first?
Sure. I think that the person is somewhat right. I definitely had a stubborn streak, but more than the stubborn streak, at the same time that we were told to wear these masks to keep in our house, that we're going to kill our parents, all of these things, there were riots and looting going on. There were orgies happening. There were people going through the streets, staying out all night, all of these things that made it not make sense to me.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so ultimately for me, and here's my unpopular opinion, I believe the more and more I watch, and as it continues to happen, um, I am realizing that being rooted in faith is the biggest threat to all of it. And for me, that's where it came down. I believe that my rights come from God, which is a terrorist thought now for a
Mm-hmm.
lot of people. And so I believe that my rights come from God, and I had a right to do what I felt I wanted to do. And people can call me selfish, but my background, my being assaulted for 3 days as a child made it that I'm not a big hugger. I'm not this, I do have these certain walls. And asking me to do this all the time was a wall for me. It wasn't a matter of I want to hurt you. I tried to do my shopping at 11 p.m. at night so that I wouldn't be bothering anyone. But this was like a constant reminder of being a kid and what I went through. And so for me, that was part of it. But that other part was I felt that they were trying to fundamentally change, and I don't think I'm wrong. I felt like they were trying to fundamentally change how we thought, what we believed. They wanted
Yes.
people, especially when it came to religious people, they wanted
Yes.
religious people to prove that they would be obedient to the state above all else. We weren't allowed to go into our places of worship. Churches that did keep their doors open found themselves extremely packed. And almost a lot of them, their message changed. Their message changed to now they're just activists. And that the heart of what they were doing is gone. So no matter what, it was about dismantling. But I ultimately felt like we were being, and we are, the goal here. And I guess this is why I would call it rudimentary evil, is that if you believe in God and you believe that God is good, you're not supposed to ultimately be into the state in everything, whether that's how we're learning in our education, what we're supposed
Mm-hmm.
to do about gender belief, what we're supposed to do about COVID. It all comes down to the experts have told us the experts are our new God.
That's the thing, is that and okay, and about this mask thing, when they first came out and said, should we do masks or not, Fauci's very first statement, if anybody remembers, was that masking was not going to help. He said that it was a 1% reduction in transmission at best if you were wearing a mask. So the fact that it changed couple of months later so drastically
Mhm.
from it's not going to do anything to help. It's not like, oh, it'll do a little. It'll do nothing to help. It's negligible. To, oh my God, every single person needs to wear it. We're in huge trouble if you don't. That to me right there was where that narrative change came from some place. It was not because they just learned more about COVID in that moment. It came from something. And then we all looked and said, oh, now we're being told we do need the mask. Let's do it. It's like they're talking about the administrative state becomes the ruler, the holder of the behaviors that we are supposed to take in order to become good people or in order to respect each other. That becomes who tells us what is right and wrong when it comes to some sort of moral value. And I don't believe that that is what, and for me, I did not believe, I believed that there was a pretty dirty ulterior motive for it. And that's why I became very upset. In the beginning, I wore a mask like everybody else and I was freaked out. But when that statement first came out and then it got changed, I knew we were playing with a way different deck of cards than I even realized. And
Mhm.
it took me some time after that to start looking a little bit more into what the administrative state is really about. And I think that's why, for me, I have such a problem with the ideology, because you have the powers that be that are the ones we're looking to as experts telling you this is how it is. And the other people that were dissident voices got censored, they got blocked, right? Didn't Zuckerberg come out with some letter the other day about, which is all full, he's full of crap, but that's a whole nother. But he did come out and say, we shouldn't have censored, the information. And he just didn't really specifically talk about why or what it was they censored, but he kind of made a generic statement, as you guys know. So it didn't give us a chance to choose for ourselves. That's my point, because
Yeah.
we weren't allowed to receive the rest of this information. We were told that Fauci was the expert. We were told that he was heading the task force, and therefore that's what we were going to do.
I think
And
you're both
go ahead.
making excellent points, both of you. I mean, Cari, with the religious elevation of the experts to godlike status, to these bishops and clergy in our state religion, uh, and Christine, the hypocrisy and the inconsistency of the messaging. What for me, I when they first started rolling out the COVID marketing in early 2020, I guess it was late 2019, early 2020, or whenever it was that
Mm-hmm.
we started to see it, it seemed like a manipulation to me. It was very clear there. So we talked about, maybe we can get into this the next time we talk, perhaps, if it still feels pertinent. But one of the things we had discussed right before coming on was RFK. And
Oh, yes.
Christine and I, right before you popped on with us, Cari, were talking about vaccines in relation to him and some of the work that he's been doing around childhood vaccines. And so I saw him speak at the Washington Capitol in 2018, I think it was. And I'd been involved in that issue around vaccine mandates for quite a while. And the playbook that was being used there, in around the mid-teens, it started to be about guilting other people. It was very heavily like, you need to do this for other people, instead of here's
Mm-hmm.
something to do to protect yourself or your baby. It's do
Mm-hmm.
this for public health. And
Mm-hmm.
so when we started to see the vaccine market has been increasing so dramatically. The amount of market share that these products make for the pharmaceutical industry has really increased since they were protected from product liability in the late 80s. And one of the really prized things that they were looking for was a way to create an adult schedule, adult mandates. So we'd been seeing the fights over the flu shot for about the past 20 years, with those becoming more and more strongly recommended and sometimes mandated in certain settings, even though the flu shot has the most horrific efficacy. I mean, it's like a
Mm-hmm.
terribly stupid product that varies
Mm-hmm.
a lot year to year. People do get sick from it. And that's a whole conversation in and of itself. But this, from the very beginning, COVID, to my friends and I who'd been involved in this vaccine conversation for a long time, looked like a campaign for an adult vaccine mandate. It just
Mm-hmm.
it looked just like a big vaccine campaign.
Yeah.
And so when that messaging started coming out, and then all of a sudden it was all about masks, it was like, what is that? What's going on with that? I'd worked in a healthcare setting. I was still working. I'd been working at the office that I worked in when COVID started for 6 years. And it's very standard for us to put on a mask when we have a sniffle, when we're a little bit cold. We're not so sick that we're going to stay home, but we sound a little bit bad. So we're going to do that because it looks good to the patients. But we all know it's because it looks good. And you also know that as soon as you touch it, you have to take it
Mm-hmm.
off and get another one.
Mm-hmm.
And so the idiocy of thinking that people can pull a mask out of their pocket and they can put it on and now they're safe to go grocery shopping. The mask that they've worn over and over and over, and you see them like sneezing and sniffling and like rubbing it or pulling it down so that they can speak really clearly to someone and then putting it back up. It's like at this point, that's a talisman.
Mm-hmm.
That's not,
Mm-hmm.
that's a
Mm-hmm.
signal. And you're not protecting anybody, but what you're doing is you're forcing people to wear advertising for your campaign. We're
Yes.
all going to signal how scared we are of this thing so that we can drum up more support for whatever measures you're going to do and force on us next. So I don't want to be involved in your freaking advertising campaign. And that's why do re mea culpa. That's why it was ridiculous. And we can go into the science on masks if you want to. They don't make sense for this particular context.
That's why the first mask I got said, "This mask is as useless as our governor." And that's what I used to run around in. And I got
Yeah.
some stares, let me tell you, but it was fun.
Mhm, mhm. Excellent.
You know,
Leslie.
Well,
you have to, yes,
yeah.
it's time. We want to remind you.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, Ninja Kitty, my favorite, putting it on in between bites at a restaurant. Helena, I never know how to say the last name, Blavatsky. I know Blavatsky. Yeah, I guess I need to know who that is. It's an historical figure, but I don't know who she is. Um, but the pseudonymous Helena says it's taking a dirty tissue and holding it to your face.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
that's right.
Especially if you're working with little kids. That's a fun one.
I know.
Oh,
Yeah, totally. Well, I didn't expect our conversation to go here today, but it's always interesting to see where it goes.
yeah.
So
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, you guys.
thank you. Thanks
Thank
everybody
you
for
so much.
joining us. Thank you,
Thanks.
Christine and Cari. See you next
Thank
Bye-bye.
you.
time.
Okay,
Okay.
bye-bye.
Oops.